from countries all around the world, and everybody coordinated. Like, there was a few people coordinating like the main website and recording the scores and stuff. But once the matches were assigned, everybody would figure out the times and to meet each other online and how they would get their games done. And some of them were recorded. And the tournament is called the 2019 Winter Derby. And it's with that Facebook online group that I've linked several times before in the past. And I'll put a link below in the description of the video. And for those who are fairly new to the channel, because I've got a few new subscribers that have come in recently, this is for the tournament format called Old School, which is not Vintage. People keep getting it confused with Vintage. Old School is like only like the first very few sets, only like, you know, we're talking like, you know, 7 sets that have like ever been like printed, the first ones. And then Vintage is like everything, you know, like 50 something sets that are 60 sets have been made like over the years. And so it's like wide open, right? Vintage has like turn 1 kills. Old School is like not like that. It's more like standard, honestly, just with more expensive cards. But anyways, so this was the online tournament. And it's a really cool thing set up by a guy. I think David Firth Bard is the guy that actually sets it up and does a lot of the organizing. And a lot of the games were followed and narrated by some other people that have their own podcasts and streams and stuff. So it's just a really cool thing. And like, the All Tings Considered, you know, that's what the name of one of the other podcasts that's actually done by Bryan Manolakos. And like a lot of old schoolers love his podcasts. And if you're interested in this format, that's another thing to check out. It's definitely pretty cool. So what I'm going to go over right now is, of course, not the 150 decks that were in it. I'm going to go over the ones that actually made the top 16. And I'm going to give some feedback on what my perspective is looking at these decks. And I've wanted to do this since the top 16 were announced, but I've just had family visiting and stuff. And I'm actually really upset that I didn't get to join this tournament because like I just got busy and I missed it. You know, like I'm in the group and stuff and I could have joined, but just with stuff going on, I missed the start of it. So there's going to be a summer derby that's going to start like around June, and I'm completely planning on being in that one, but I missed the start of this one, unfortunately. So anyways, these 16 decks I'm going to go over. I have not spoken with the actual creators, pilots of these decks in person. I did not watch these games online. I saw like a couple minutes of the very last match, but like not the full thing. But I will show you guys links where the actual you can watch some of the matches online. But again, this is just my take when I'm looking at these decks. And again, like I could be missing things that maybe the pilots of these decks, you know, would actually have some feedback for me, and I would encourage them to come on into this video and list their feedback below if there's something that I missed. So with that, let me now minimize my display here. There we go. So I'm off there in the corner. And this first deck that we've got here. Okay. This is a deck. It's by Savant Landgraf, I believe. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. It's effectively a disco troll deck. And what you've got here is you've got an awful lot of counter magic that's actually going on. You got a mana drain, you've got a spell blast, and you have 4 counter spells that are inside of there. So there's basically 6 counter spells main deck. And there's also a city in a bottle in here somewhere. I found it before. That's main deck in the deck. Where is that? There's the Chaos Orb. I'll find it another point. There's a city. Oh, there it is right there. City in a bottle in that deck that's main deck. And that's a really interesting choice there because, you know, you really got to make a good call in the metagame when you're going into a tournament format, because when you make a really solid metagame call like that, you might end up being wrong and you've got a dead card in your deck. But if you call it right and you're basically pre-sideboarded against a format that you're going to be running in, then man, hats off to you. That's a really awesome call. And just looking at these other decks, I can confidently say that this was a good meta choice. So Svan made a fantastic call there, doing the City in a Bottle main deck. I can clearly tell you that. So Disco Troll, for some of you who are not familiar with it, the key cards here are the Nevinral's Disc and the Sedge Trolls, and these guys are regenerating, and there are 3/3s when you've got swamps in play. So the general idea is that you keep the board clear and you don't let your opponent, you know, take control and do what they want to do because you're constantly disking to clear the board, but you keep your aggression going by having your trolls that stay out there. So that's kind of the general theme, and then the rest of it is support around that main theme. Now, on that note, I don't see this very often. This deck was actually packing Twiddle main deck. So the obvious use there that I see right off the bat is you drop a Nevinrall's disc and it comes into play tapped. And oftentimes people will blow up your disc before you get the chance to play it. So what you can do with a Twiddle is you play your disc and they think they're going to disenchant your disc on like the end of turn or something. So the end of turn comes and then they try to disenchant it, and then you Twiddle in response, and your Twiddle untaps it before the disenchant resolves, and then you can put the blow up effect on the stack. So their disenchant is gonna, like, you know, it like effectively would have killed it, but you're using it before they got the chance really to blow it up. So I see that as the first immediate need for it, but I suppose there's also some need, like, to get out of jail free. Like if someone casts a huge creature, you can lock it down with a Twiddle or something before they hit you with it. Things like that. I didn't see any thing like a Time Vault or anything, so I assume it was mostly using it with the disc. And, you know, I haven't played enough Disco Troll to say if that would be a good choice, but it's questionable because there's a lot of other cards that can really be useful as well. So I was curious about that. Down here in the sideboard, I did notice this card. This is a Ghost Ship, and that's a 2/4 flying card that has Regenerate. And that's an interesting one because the Regenerate definitely fits the Disco Troll theme, but you know, it's very expensive to play like the card and to play the Regenerate ability. I think it's like 3 blues or something like that, if I remember right. So that's an interesting like sideboard choice. I'd be curious to see how that actually worked out for him, and like, you know, talk to him at some point, or if he wants to leave comments below about like how that actually worked out in the actual game. Now, another thing I noticed is a lot of Disco Troll decks, they'll play like a lot of creatures. And this one was fairly shy on creatures. It had the Sedge Trolls main deck, and it's got the Mishra's Factories to get some, you know, creature aggression going through. But there's not an awful lot, so which forces this deck, if it's not going aggression, it has to go more control. So I was curious how that actual balance played out. So anyways, going to the next deck. This was by Edwin Artisan, and it is a blue-red aggro deck. Now, the thing that made this one hard is that you can see he has some really heavy altars here at the top. And it's really hard for me to tell what these altars actually are. So my comments on this deck are definitely, like, you know, possibly off base to begin with. But I kind of think these ones here on the top right might be bolts. And I think these might be counterspells. And I don't even know what these ones are. I can't tell. But he has some Serendib Efreets inside of here. So as basically an aggro deck, I know he's got those guys. I'm wondering if these ones here are creatures, but okay, there's his creature aggression, basically. And for right now, I'm assuming that these are lightning bolts because I see that he's got 2 fireballs down here. So you're probably not going to add fireballs before you put the bolts in, because the bolts are just generally better than fireballs because they're so mana efficient. So I know if those are bolts and those are fireballs, he's got the Serendibs for damage, and he's got bolts and fireballs for damage, so that's a decent amount of damage. And he's got some control ability here with the actual blue counter magic inside there. And there is some mana disruption that's going on in this deck, because I can see there's 3 Blood Moons main deck. And, you know, huge props for that. My cat's about to jump up here. Huge props for having the Blood Moons main deck, because as you'll see here in this video, there's an awful lot of decks that just flat out get shut down, you know, by actually having a Blood Moon in play, right? It can actually be like a really like powerful thing to actually have a Blood Moon in play. So, especially main deck, you know, because right off, my cat's tail's getting in the way here. Because right off the bat, I mean, you're giving them an enormous problem with their actual mana base. Some decks will just auto lose to play in an early Blood Moon. So another thing there is I noticed there's 2 Red Elemental Blasts main deck, and that's a solid metagame choice depending on the format that you're going into also. And, you know, it can really be up in the air for that one, because a lot of people play Arabian Nights, so City in a Bottle is a great card to have because it just kills all the Arabian Nights cards. But the Red Elemental Blast is, of course, assuming that your opponents are going to be playing an awful lot of blue, which in general works for old school, but in these kinds of tournaments and formats, you know, it's surprising the number of, like, you know, White Weenie or Armageddon kind of decks with no blue that you actually run into, and those would be dead cards main deck. So, you know, it's an interesting meta choice. I'd be curious to hear how that actually worked out for him. And let's see. Oh, another thing I called out on this deck, and I got some notes here in front of me, is that he doesn't have an awful lot of artifacts. He's got the Chaos Orb, but that generally doesn't stay around very long. He's got the Lotus, which doesn't stay long, so his more quasi-permanent artifacts are the Soul Ring and the Moxen. So he's very resistant to Energy Flux, which would have probably been like a pretty decent strategy to consider doing the Energy Flux main deck also, depending on your meta. He probably could have survived with that, but he's got 4 of them there on the sideboard, and I bet those probably helped him out pretty well. So I really like that he kept himself very, like, you know, safe to Energy Fluxes being played. And by the way, I love these signed beta islands. Those are so cool. So going to the next one. What we got next is Ben Twitchin made this deck, and I kind of called it a kitchen sink deck because it's kind of all over the place. Honestly, it's got City in a Bottle main deck, which I recognize as a good meta call for this format. It's got a lot of control cards and an awful lot of removal that's inside of there with 3 Swords to Plowshares, and it's got Disenchants, and it's got Balance. It's got some shutdown there with Icy Manipulator, and of course the Chaos Orb and the Psionic Blast. So it's got a lot of tricks here, and the win conditions are kind of interesting. Like, I don't think I've ran into a deck like this before in old school. Where like one of the main strategies is you've got like a Cyclopean Tomb and you got a Karma. So you can turn lands into swamps and then make them take damage for it and also shut off their mana with that. So that's interesting. And he's also got that Titana's Song there, so he can like shift his artifacts over to creatures and start swinging. You know, so suddenly Icy, you know, becomes like a 4/4 creature that you can swing with. So, I mean, you got a couple like different kind of strategies going on there, which I thought was pretty interesting. And also there's a mirror universe that's inside of here. There it is. And so if he's got the mirror universe, you know, you can like swap your life out and then swing with a couple of artifacts and then, you know, finish you off or something like that. So if I saw this list right off the bat, I honestly would have like thought like it's probably not all going to work out because it's kind of so all over the place. But you know what? He made the top 16 out of like 150 people. So, man, dude, hats off to you. He must be... Either there's strategy that I don't clearly recognize in this deck, or you're just a really good player. But, you know, seriously, man, props to you for that, to Ben. And here we have Christian Reinhard's deck, and this is basically a green, white, black Urnamageddon deck. And I really like the interesting balance he had between like beefy creatures and the mana producing creatures. You can see he's got a couple of Urnams, a couple of Serra Angels, 4 Serendibs, so a good array of pretty beefy creatures. And he's only chosen to do 2 Llanowar Elves and 2 birds. And I really appreciate this because I've also been experimenting with like green, white, blue Urnamageddon and trying to figure out what that balance should be. I mean, there's a tendency to want to put Birds of Paradise in there because, you know, it fixes a lot of colors that you might actually need and keeps you like on your curve better like that. But at the same time, you know, the Llanowar Elves can actually swing for 1, and there's times where that actually makes a difference, right? So he's actually chosen to go 2 and 2 here, which I actually really like. And but I don't really like the fact that he's only got 2 Armageddon in the deck here. That seems a little thin to me for an Armageddon strategy. I mean, I've played these decks a few times, and I've done up to 4 Armageddons for sure. But oftentimes you end up with like 2 Armageddons in hand, and you only really want 1. So it ends up being a dead card. And if you play 3, that seems, in my opinion, to be about the right balance. I would lean towards that specifically. Like, I would think with 2 Armageddons, there's going to be an awful lot of times where you've got the setup. You really need that Geddon to limit your opponent's options, but like it just doesn't show up because it's just buried in the deck somewhere. So I didn't know about that. The Ley Druid you see over here, he was a bit of an odd choice. The Ley Druid, his ability is to untap a land. And so the abilities that I can see, obviously, I think this is a Library of Alexandria, I'm guessing right here, that can actually, so of course, you know, draw an extra card with the Ley Druid. Or you could use the Pendlehaven right here, and you could like put a couple of creature pumps on the stack, like with those Llanowar Elves, for instance. Or you could use it with the Mishra's Factories, and you could, you know, get additional pumps out of the Mishra's Factories. or you could even like get that extra color of mana that you were needing with the, you know, the dual lands like that. So it's got some ability. But the thing is, though, a 3-drop creature in kind of like a oftentimes aggressive kind of deck like this, it's an interesting choice. You don't normally see it. So that Ley Druid, I'm curious to know like how well that actually worked out for him. Now also the Icy Manipulators you see here, they of course can be fantastic in an Armageddon kind of lockdown deck because you can limit mana or shut down creatures until you can deal with them, things like that. But the thing that's interesting about it is like, I like to go by the theory of like, if you're going to do something, you know, oftentimes like do it, you know, more extensively because you're going to bleed out your opponent's removal for it. And you see that in this deck, he's only got a few mana artifacts that are basically just artifacts. And he's got, of course, you know, the Sylvan Library here. But there isn't like a ton of targets that an opponent is going to want to use his disenchants on, or that he's going to really feel like if they're optimal. I mean, disenchants will probably go towards the Mishra's Factories pretty well. And they might try to blow up the Chaos Orb in response to activated it or something like that. But it seems like these Ices would be a pretty large target. And a lot of decks you're going to see play with the 4 disenchants, even like this one here is. So with a deck like this, it seems like those Icy Manipulators are not going to last very long in the game. It seems like they'd probably take 4 mana, they'd probably get put into play, and then promptly blown up pretty quickly. So that's what I would suspect. I would be curious to like talk to him and hear how those actually went. Because what I would say is like, in place of those 2 Icy Manipulators, he might be a little bit better off like increasing one of his other strategies. Like if these were enchantments instead of just artifacts, or if these were like more like creatures to keep that strategy going, or another Armageddon, for instance. Something like that could actually be a bit more useful. So yeah, there you go. There it is for that one. And let's see, that was Christian Reinhardt. So now let's go to Tobias. Oh yeah, sorry, one more thing. In this deck, I also had a note here for myself that a couple of counterspells, at least if they were like power sinks or something, could actually possibly be pretty good to protect like what your game plan is. So here we got, I believe, the one and only copy of the deck that actually was being played in this top 16 out of 150 people, which is right there. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Everyone assumes that the deck is going to be the one that wins every single tournament. And I'm not going to go over all the results for these, but I will tell you that the deck did not actually win this tournament. So it's interesting that only one of them actually made it into the top 16 decks, actually. So very interesting. So this deck, this version of the deck, I should say, is fairly typical. It's like a mix between like, you know, a little bit of old school kind of deck style, like original the deck, and the newer version. Like the original versions would of course play like Sarah Angels and things like that, and they would also have Mirror Universe, and this doesn't have the Sarahs inside of it, but it does have the Mirror Universe, which you don't see super often. I noticed that there's no Disrupting Scepter that's actually played inside the deck. So one of the things that the deck tries to do is it tries to, like, you know, outdraw you, bleed you out of answers, then get you underneath that scepter, and you're kind of like stuck. You either got to play something or you're going to lose it. And that's when the deck will oftentimes start swinging with its factories. So I noticed he didn't play a Disrupting Scepter in the deck. And he's got one in the sideboard here, but not on the main board. And he also has 3 books, and some of them are even going up to 4 James Day tomes. So that's kind of interesting. And I also noticed there's no Time Twister. That's something that's very modernly done with like these old school, the deck versions. I know there's a big school of thought out there that a lot of people say, like, you know, the Time Twister isn't really needed and there's ways around it. And of course there's ways around it. I am a believer that it is still a card deserving to be in the Power 9, and it is useful in these decks. I've just had way too many games where a twist, you know, just really does the trick. I mean, if you're playing the deck and if you're already leading, but that means you've been drawing like crazy and you've been knocking stuff out, when you twist, oftentimes it seems like you get back more of your, you know, needed counters and answers than the opponent's going to, because you've been going through your deck faster and your graveyard is just filled with them, right? What you've got on the table is like a lot of mana, because these decks are almost always half mana. And so you get a lot of those back. So anyways, I don't want to go too much into it, but I think the twist deserves more credit than it actually gets, and it seems kind of like a modern trend now to think that the twist doesn't have a place in the deck anymore. It's also interesting to note that this deck has 2 plains and 2 islands. And a lot of versions of the deck don't do that these days. They just run a little bit more riskier in the face of like Blood Moon and stuff, and he actually did put those in. And I bet those are actually probably pretty helpful. As long as he didn't need his other colors too badly, and he's able to get away with those, they might have really helped him survive some Blood Moons and stuff like that. Those 4 cities of brass would probably hurt quite a bit though. And so yeah, let's moving on here. Now we got, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Lawrence Boulanger. I hope I'm saying that right. And he has a green, white, blue Urnamageddon deck. Now, I really want to stress on this deck, I was really impressed looking over this list. Partially because I'm kind of exploring this myself. I actually did a live stream a while ago, and I'm building a deck that's like this for one of my next mid-range, you know, little giveaway there. And I was leaning towards something very similar to this, and I'm still not done with my changes, but it seemed to have been moving around and moving towards this. And now I'm looking at a list thinking like, this is actually pretty similar to where I was actually going, right? And also I want you guys to notice that this list, there's almost no power 9. I mean, he's got an Ancestral Recall and a Time Walk here, but they're not critical to the deck. It can survive without it. You got no Lotus, no Mox Scissor inside of here, no Time Twister. It's got the Ancestral and the Walk, of course, but this deck can survive without it. So what you've basically got here is a pretty solid mid-range deck that does in fact have a lot of dual lands though. So I mean, you do need to like cough up some bucks for that. But a deck like this could be put together, you know, without too much money compared to a lot of the other decks. And it made the top 16. And actually, you know what? I'll just go ahead and tell you guys, if you haven't read the link yet, I think this deck either got 3rd or 4th in the overall tournament. Like a deck that was almost completely unpowered, right? So I'm super impressed with that. Very good build. He obviously balanced it well. He obviously played it well. And it's a testament to the fact that you don't have to have power 9 in this format to be super competitive. So let's see, is there any other notes I had on this guy? Okay, no Sarahs. Yeah, he did not pack Sarah Angels in the deck, but he did do Urnams. And the reason why those Urnams look a little different is because those are gold bordered ones. Technically, I think those are not legal for old school. I mean, you can use like collector's edition, you can use like various printings, but they have to have original art, original border, and these ones actually don't because they have the gold back and stuff. So I think everyone was just being lenient because, you know, Urnams are not super expensive. And if I played with him personally, I'd of course be 100% okay with it. Some people online get a little weird about that. But I just want to make sure, because I don't want anyone to think that, you know, the gold bordered cards are strictly legal. They're not in old school. But yeah, he did not do the Sarah Angels, but he did have a really nice mix of creatures here. He had beef with the Urnams and the Serendib Efreets. He had good early aggression with the Savannah Lions and the Argothian Pixies. And they're just going to win a Mishra's Factory War because, you know, they don't take damage from artifacts. And he had a good solid mana base with his Llanowar Elves. And he had lots of removal with the 4 disenchants. And I love that he did the 3 Energy Fluxes main deck. That's exactly the direction I'm going with my deck. You know, the one that I'm building that's like this. Because that's just so powerful. I mean, if you can main deck that, sure, there'll be games where it's a dead card. But as you'll see with an awful lot of these decks, it's a solid play. You drop an Energy Flux and there's some decks that just lose. And there's other decks that just suddenly have a huge disadvantage. But when you're limiting their mana rocks already with Energy Flux, and then you're dropping Armageddon, it just plays into the strategy. And so I love this build, honestly. I think it's just really fantastic. I'm happy with this sideboard too, except for I'm a little curious about the Cop Blacks. I wonder if he really tested this out against like various other forms of decks, and out of all the circle protections that exist, if the Cop Blacks actually truly ended up being the ones that he needed the most. Just curious about that. I'll have to see. Anyways, so this next deck, what we've got is a blue-white Flyers, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this name right. It's Pez Van Holy. I'm really not sure if I'm saying that right. Apologies if I am. So what you've got here is basically kind of like a Death from Above kind of style deck where you've got the Serendib Efreets right here, and you've got the Serra Angels, and you can see the moats there. So he's obviously going to be going for a creature battle, but he's already, like, you know, got an advantage because he's got the moats and he can keep swinging, but you can't as soon as those moats are actually played. But what was interesting to me about this deck, and I'd be curious to talk to him and find out if this ended up being one of the problems, this deck doesn't seem to know if it wants to go full control and late game attacking or if it wants to go early aggression. Because sure, a Serendib can come out quick when you got the right artifacts and things like that you can drop. But the problem that I see is that this doesn't have like flying men or some early aggression. So that means with the Serendibs and the Serras, it's going to be like mid to late attacking, right? But in a mid to late attacking game, you know, having a lot of draw ability and stuff like that is really important. So I don't know, I'm a little curious about that, how that actually works out. But you know, he does have a lot of counters to keep, and a lot of disenchants and a lot of plows, so he can get himself to the late game pretty well. And he does still have those 2 Jame tomes, which are going to have him in the late game. So it does, I don't know, looking at it again, you know, he does seem to have the tools he's probably going to need to make it to that late game or that mid-range game. So, you know, maybe that ends up working out. I'd be curious to talk to him and like kind of like hear more about how those actual matchups went. 4 Serras does seem like an awful lot though, because very early, I mean, it's not super often you're going to get a Serra Angel out on turns 1 or 2 or something like that. It's usually going to be at least a little bit later. And you're really tapping out to do it. And for a deck that tries to play defensive with counter magic, tapping out to drop like a 3rd or 4th turn Serra is quite a commitment. You know, it can leave you a little bit more open. So by the time you've gotten to like mid or late game, I mean, multiple Serras is an interesting question because, I mean, they're all 5 costs and you really got to tap down for it. Not so bad with mana drains, but you only got 1 in the deck, right? So I don't know, but anyways, his mana base on this is honestly really, looks pretty solid to me. I think when I counted it, it was somewhere around 28, and it does actually have some basic lands there with those islands and the plains. So I did think that the mana base is pretty solid, and it does have all the tools it requires. So overall, I definitely like the deck, and I think this is a very interesting build, and maybe it runs exactly how it needs to run. So yeah, I'd be curious to talk to him about that. So this next one was done by Richard Stebbing, and it's blue, red, black, effectively flyers. It's mostly blue and red, as you can actually see. There's only a little tiny bit of black. So you've got some Serendibs and you've got some flying men. And so it's obviously like early aggression, but then there's like a lot of fire that this thing that's like has its backing it up. You got 4 bolts and 4 chains and 3 psionic blasts and a fireball. So that's effectively 12 direct damage spells in the deck. That's an awful lot of cards directed to direct damage. So very clearly his strategy is come out with aggressive creatures, knock your life down, and then you have all this fire in hand that you can just either clear the board out to keep your flyers going through, or you can throw it at their face and finish the game. And it's obviously an effective build. It looks like it's had some time being balanced, and I bet he's probably pretty good at playing it. I see that there is, let's see, it has the 2 Shatters main deck, and it has the 1 Chaos Orb, which I thought this part was interesting, because it is a good, quick, aggressive deck, and he's definitely put most of his marbles into the aggression tactic, because with 2 Shatters and a Chaos Orb, he's literally only got 3 cards in the deck that are meant for like removing artifacts, and he's only got 1 that's meant for removing, that could remove enchantments with the Chaos Orb. So there's not a lot of removal in there, right? There is some counter magic. So if he can work his plan, it looks to me like this deck is effectively get the creatures out fast, start pounding them in the face, protect them with counter magic, shoot down opposition with fire, and then if you can, draw into enough fire to either finish the game with creatures or throw the other fire at their face. That's effectively the strategy. And yeah, I could definitely bet this was probably pretty effective. The sideboard looked pretty good to me also. This looked like a well-refined sideboard with the energy fluxes that are just, sometimes they'll just win games. The ready Elemental Blast, Blue Elemental Blast, an additional Shatter, an Earthquake to knock creatures off the board. Or maybe just some to control magics if you're going up against something that can't blow up your control magics and you can just swing the game the other direction. The Boomerang's a really interesting play too, because like I said, he doesn't have a lot of enchantment removal, so that Boomerang would give him a way to like pull that back. Something that I thought was worth considering is with this many basic islands, he's got the 5 basic islands, he could have possibly put those blood moons in main deck and probably could have supported that. So that was curious that he didn't actually, and I wonder if what he thought about that like afterwards, if those blood moons could have possibly have just gone in. And then also you'll notice there's only the on-color Moxen. He doesn't have the off-color Moxes, so it's more just kind of down to business, get it done, you know, with what the game strategy is. So the next deck here, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this name right. Guillaume Denois. Apologies if I didn't get that right. It's a blue-red Flyers deck, actually very similar to the last deck that I just covered. And you got 8 Flyers main deck. It's very similarly, you got those Serendibs and the Flying Men, early aggression. Then you got lots of fire spells, the bolts and the chains and the fireball. A little bit of difference between this deck and the last deck is this one seems to have more basic lands, probably because it doesn't have that third color of black in it. It's just the blue and the red. It allows them a bit more freedom. And it has the Earthquakes main deck, which is probably a really good call to clear out all those little weenies and keep, you know, your Flyers like, you know, aggressively going. And the damage also from the Earthquake to their face is probably pretty good because you're packing all that fire and early aggression. So it's a great fit for that. I also like his selection of mana base here. I think it's really solid. He's got the on-color Moxen as needed, and plus the Soul Ring, and all those basic lands leaves him in a really good position to play some Blood Moons main deck. But he didn't actually. He also chose to keep the Blood Moons in the sideboard. And I'm curious about that. You know, as a meta call, he could have definitely done Blood Moons main deck. Could have even possibly done these Energy Flux main deck. But again, that's a meta call. And when you don't know, it's maybe good to be conservative. But I don't know, maybe that would have actually done very well in like a lot of games, having those main decks. So that's iffy, right? That's a total meta call, one direction or another. And the red and the blue elemental blasts are just fantastic. This is a card I want to call out here. This Fork, I mean, if there was ever a deck that Fork is like made for, it's like this. Because look at all these targets that Fork has got. You can do bolts, chains, fireball, shatters. You can do a time walk or an ancestral or a brain geyser or one of your counters or your Psy Blast. So many good targets for a Fork to actually hit. And people often forget that you can use a Fork to actually win a counter war also. Like if you do something and they counter it, you can fork their counter and counter their counter with your Fork. I mean, just so many good targets. Like I love the Fork in here. And if ever there was a deck that was like meant for Fork, I would say this was it. And that alone makes me like, I would want to play this deck. I mean, this would be exciting to do just kind of because of that fact almost by itself. And lots of counter magic main deck. You got 4 counters and you got a drain. Really love that. So yeah, a really well-balanced deck. I'm fond of it. I would love to play something like this as well. So this deck is by Michael Scheffenacker, and it's a red, blue, black, green, ATOG kind of aggro burn kind of deck. So of course, those ATOGs pop right out, and you see that they got a lot of artifacts to eat, you know, and keep swinging at the face. So this is definitely a deck that's going to have at least the threat of some late game ATOGs that'll come flying at your face. He's got a main deck city in a bottle here. So Michael, you definitely get props for calling the metagame right and doing a main deck city in a bottle. I mean, that's a good call. And when I look over the list of all the decks that join this tournament, there's an awful lot of Arabian Nights in there. And so, man, you nailed that. I'm sure that card helped you out an awful lot. So he's got the full complement of Power 9 in here. There's the blue, and there's all the Moxen and Lotus. And he's abusing the power of the Mind Twist and the Demonic Tutor there. So awful lot of powerful stuff inside this deck. And they even get some back with the Regrowth. And so obviously his strategy is do a lot of early damage with like the Black Vice and the Ankh of Mishra, right? So I mean, those are going to knock some points off immediately, which puts some pressure on your opponent. And then you got these ATOGs and these Suchis to do some damage, also backed up with some Mishra's Factories here. And then like as later in the game, your opponent gets underneath the Vice and gets their mana stable so they don't have to keep playing their lands. the value of the Vice and that Ankh drops off, but then at that point he can feed it to the Atog and swing in. So it's a good late term strategy. And with all this fire he's got, with all these bolts and these chains, you know, that's a really good late game finisher. So you kind of got like your early damage here on the table. You got that mid game pressure, and then you got some fire to either clear the board or finish the game off. And then an amazing assortment here of an awful lot of powerful cards here to just keep your hand full and keep abusing the game. So yeah, very impressive deck. Very impressive. I don't know if honestly I would give this any like changes that it seems like it deserves to have made. The Cities of Brass is an awful lot. There's 4 of them in there, and I bet those were painful. If it was possible to trade a city for like another, like, you know, Taiga or like another Badlands, you know, maybe that would be an interesting question or debate to have. But other than that, yeah, fantastic build. I think he did a really good job with this. Okay, so next we have Elias Grande, I think is how you pronounce it. Now, this is a really interesting red, blue, mostly red, blue with a tiny bit of black and green. It's like a flying control kind of deck. And he's also got a ton of white in here. So, you know, it's effectively 5 colors, you know, but, you know, only with that 1 green for regrowth. So he's working an awful lot of colors here, which makes the mana base a little bit more rickety. So let's see, what are my notes here? So I did note that there was 4 Shivan Dragons inside of here, which of course are 6. And then only 2 Serendibs. That's an interesting little play there, because the Serendibs, normally you'll see like 4 Serendibs and like 2 Shivans. Because, you know, 6 drop is an awful lot, right? When you're also trying to play kind of the counter control game, you kind of want to keep your mana open. And by the 3 counter spells and a drain, I know that he's playing the counter control game at least a little bit. But having those 6 Shivan Dragons seems like an awful big investment into beefy fat creatures, where he might have fared better with like 4 Serendibs and 2 Shivans. So that'd be an interesting discussion to actually have. The 2 Disenchants seems like a little bit of a risk to me in this format, because there's so many good artifacts and things and enchantments that can be very threatening. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. Now, something else that stood out to me after looking at this deck for a little bit, he doesn't have a lot of early game aggression. He's got some big creatures. You know, the Serendibs can come out pretty quick with the right draw and stuff, and he's got the tools here. So in those times where he draws the mana and the Serendibs, I'm sure, of course, they came out fast. But for the most part, those Shivan Dragons probably did not. So for the most part, this is not an early aggression kind of deck, you know, not with that small number of creatures as well. So it's kind of leaning more towards late game. But then when you look at the deck and you say, okay, well, what's your late game strategy? Well, he only has 1 Jayemdae tome that I see here. So if he's trying to do a late game strategy, he doesn't have an awful lot of card draw to kind of keep up with the Joneses, basically. You know, keep up with that mid to late game and not fall behind in the card advantage realm. And of course, he's got his Brain Geyser, his Ancestral, his Time Twister, his Time Walk, and there's a Wheel of Fortune in there. So he's got his card draw options. They're in there, right? He's got his metagame call here with his Red Elemental Blast. But if I had to guess at anything, the thing that might have made this deck a little tougher to survive is that it kind of leans towards a control deck, but it's missing some of the key draw components to really keep it up, and it might not have enough removal, you know, to keep up with what's going on with just those 2 Disenchants. So those would be the questions I would kind of ponder out loud to see if that's a big thing. Now, also, you'll notice there's this remove enchantments here. That's a very interesting call, because he doesn't tend to have a lot of enchantments on his side. I mean, he's got the moats here, and he's got the energy fluxes in the sideboard, but he doesn't tend to have a lot of enchantments here. And who knows what his opponent's going to do. I'm very curious about that one, if that ended up being as good as he was hoping, or if it would have been better served by a Disenchant. So, I don't know, that'd be an interesting little question to bring up if I ever got the chance to talk to Elias about his deck. So this deck, okay, there's kind of like a love thing going on with this one. So this is kind of like 5 Color Zoo, effectively. It's by Paul De Silva, and definitely, you know, followed some of his like posts and stuff. So I know the guy to some degree, and I love the way that this deck looks. It looks a lot of fun to play. I love how it's just got all these directions that it can go. I mean, you got your fatty creatures with like your Shivan Dragon, you got your Mahamodis, you got some mid-game beef with the Urnams, and some early aggression with those Scrib Sprites and the Serendibs. So it's definitely got, let's see what my notes here, like the kind of the creature ramp seems like it's a really good creature ramp. And when it comes down to like powerful cards that can be abused, there's the Tutor, there's the Twist, the Regrowth, the blue power is all there, the Brain Geyser, the Wheel. He's got all the kind of the general key big powerful spells, and he's got at least some removal there with, you know, he's got the bolts, of course, but the plows and the disenchants and the chaos orb. So it's got all the tools, right? But the biggest problem that I see in this deck is that it's attempting to do 5 colors. And if you look here at the dual land set, it's got quite a mix of dual lands, right? And so I'd be very curious to know how that color mix actually worked out. I could definitely see going against like a deck, like if this was Eternal Central rules and he's facing 4 strips, then I would bet he probably wouldn't play this deck because a couple well-placed strips are just going to shut you down. Besides that, if this deck had Blood Moon played against it, what are you going to do, right? I mean, you need to get that white out there to activate your disenchant and blow that Blood Moon off the table. I mean, I suppose you could do a Chaos Orb to try and blow up a Blood Moon, but that's kind of like your only out. If somebody gets an early Blood Moon against you, you're kind of shut down. If they, like, you know, drop a Blood Moon and kill your birds, you know, game's nearly over, right? The only threat in your deck at that point forward is just that one Chaos Orb. Other than that, you're really stuck. So yeah, he would need to have like some blue, some islands to at least get those blue elemental blasts to blow the Blood Moon off the table or something. So that seems to be a pretty big weakness, and I wonder if that actually hit him a little bit. So if I was gonna critique this deck and kind of keep it more in the theme that it's in, I might personally drop. Let's see, what's the note here I've got? Let me find it. I might have dropped 2 Scrib Sprites for 2 more Disenchant main deck to kind of keep their threats off the table. And probably would have tried to put at least some basic planes in there, squeeze them in somehow, and see if you can eliminate 1 or 2 colors out of there. Like maybe drop the Regrowth and go with Recall, so green is now no longer a thing. That'd be just, I don't know, something to maybe consider with it. Or maybe just try to cast the Demonic Tutor and the Mind Twist off of like either Birds of Paradise or City of Brass, and not have black in your lands, so you can now keep your mana base focused on what the majority of the deck is be a possible way to go. Now for the sideboard, some of these choices here in the sideboard I thought was kind of interesting. A lot of people are doing Circle of Protection black, I've noticed, for the sideboards for this tournament, and that's a really interesting meta call. And I wonder how much those actually got boarded in, because I look at this deck and I think, okay, if somebody's packing a black deck, man, look at all the beef they've got. I mean, they got a great creature assortment. So even if somebody was doing a really impressive black deck, with a deck like this, you know, that can blow Jazams off the table with plows and like a creature block with a bolt and things like that, I don't honestly know if a black deck would be super threatening. And it's kind of a similar situation with the Glooms. If a Gloom would really honestly be that impressive. I mean, the rest of his sideboard I think is fine. But those Glooms and the Circle of Protection black is a little iffy to me. I'm a little curious on if that is the best tactic to go with in this deck. But as long as you could actually effectively play your cards, I mean, this looks like a really fun deck. I mean, you gotta say that. And in terms of the card selection, I mean, look at all these beta cards. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And I like how he set it up too with, you know, the angle kind of like that. I think that's about it. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So this is John, and then we're on deck number 14 here, by the way. So we've only got, like, including this 3 decks left. So John Cheeta, I think, is maybe how you pronounce it. And it's a white-blue aggro control. And so a lot of people did the dice to represent how many copies of that card they've got. Thank you, John, for using high contrast dice. You can actually see the number of digits on the dice clearly. A lot of people don't do that, and then it's really difficult to see. So he did that, and he's got the right color dice, and he did it right, so thank you. I can actually see. So it's got a really good creature base here. It's got the Savannah Lions and the Serendibs for early aggression. That's, of course, very good. It's got the Mishra's Factories also. So you got some good early game aggression. You got some mid to late game here with the Suchis and the Sarah Angels. So the mana ramp seems honestly just fantastic. It's got a lot of removal. What you've got here is you got 4 Plow, 4 Disenchant, then you got 2 Psyblast, and then you have a Balance and you have a Chaos Orb. And then you've also got, I mean, look at this, an awful lot of counter magic too. You've got 4 counter spells, 4 power sinks, and then also a mana drain. That's an awful lot of counter magic to have in there. So it obviously wants to get the early aggression out and then protect them to kind of like just send them the distance to try to get a win. And you want to get stuff out of the way for your creatures with the plows and the disenchants and stuff. So he definitely wants to win with his creatures. And he wants to keep the creatures on the table and shut down the opponent's strategy with his removal and the counter magic. And it's a solid tactic. I mean, this will win. This will definitely win a lot of games. And I'm sure that's one of the major reasons that he made it into the top 16. You know, so again, congrats on that. And if I had to give any possible suggestions, and again, like I'm not the pilot, so he, of course, would know better than me, I would be initially questioning having 9 counterspells in the deck, which is very reactive, right? Maybe since he's already going with aggression here, maybe going with a little less reactive cards, 9 reactive slots there, and not including all the removal, and going with a little bit more aggression. I wonder if that would actually help a little bit more. So that'd be the thing I would be questioning on a deck like this. So also, he might not need all that removal and all that counter magic if he had a bit more draw on here. So maybe a Jaime Day Tome would be a really good placement inside of here. And also, a couple Jaime Day Tomes might suck down some of the opposing disenchants to protect them from not hitting his Suchis and his Mishra's Factories and stuff like that. And also his sideboard cards. And also this sideboard here, I should say, it honestly looks a little bit underdeveloped to me. It looks like the kind of sideboard where it's like, you know, I just threw the deck together. I joined the tournament. I didn't really know what to put. And so this is what started in my sideboard initially. If I had to guess, that's what I would kind of guess at. Because, yeah, the Mahamoti, I mean, we've already got a lot of this creature. It's a little questionable on how much that would have helped. And the Cop Red and Cop Black. Mazes, of course, are, you know, good with the right matchup. The Moat, you know, he's negating an awful lot of attackers here with his Moat here, so that one's questionable. So yeah, I think the sideboard's a little underdeveloped, but, you know, I like the main deck. I just probably try to add a little bit more draw into it personally. So second to last deck here, this one was done by Rich Shay, and this is a Stasis deck. And of course, I've got a lot of experience playing Stasis, but of course, I play more Turbo. My version of Turbo Stasis, which is like blue-red with the Mishra's with the Winter Orbs and stuff like that. So mine's a little bit of a different strategy, different take. This is a little bit more traditional because you can see there's the Kismets there. But usually, when you go more traditional, you tend to pack, you know, some Swords to Plowshares and more Disenchant. And I thought this was interesting. They'd only had 1 Disenchant in the deck. And that seemed a little light to me on the removal. When you're playing a deck like this and there's some cards you really need to get off the table, like an Opposing Energy Flux or something, or a Blood Moon. I mean, a Blood Moon would be really killer to this because you'd lose a lot of blue mana. And it'd be really hard to keep that Stasis running, right? And yeah, so I mean, if you're not going to get a counter on that Blood Moon right off the bat, you've got your real Hurtsville. And as you guys can see, there's an awful lot of Blood Moons in the format, even main deck. And he's not packing an awful lot of islands in here. So with this few islands and no planes that I can see, I probably honestly, if I had built this, I would have leaned deeper into the disenchants. And I also noticed he's only got 3 boomerangs. And my experience with Stasis is, man, boomerangs are key, right? Because they not only, like, you know, you can let an opponent think that they got something good because they tap all this mana, play something, and then you put it back in their hand, and now they're all tapped out, and that's when you lock with the Stasis. I mean, boomerangs are just huge. And also to pull that Stasis back to your hand. So I'd be much more leaning towards, like, 4 boomerangs would be a better call. And I also noticed that it's got the library, Ivory Tower is inside there. And Ivory Tower, of course, is an amazing card. One of the best life gainers in all of old school. Me personally, though, I would lean more towards trying to set and keep the lock is what I would be going more towards. Because generally speaking, like with a good stasis deck, once you've got a lockdown, you're in a pretty good position, right? And you're not going to necessarily need a ton of life gain if you can actually set and maintain that lock. So me personally, I'd probably lean more towards trying to get other cards in to help me set and keep the lock, personally. Also, I saw no Twiddles in here. And Twiddle can be a pretty big card for stasis because, you know, if they actually get something in play, you can lock it. Now, on the other hand, he's got those Kismets in there. So his build wouldn't need Twiddle as much as mine would. But, you know, he does have, I think there's the Time Vault there. And Twiddle is huge. When you're packing Time Vault and you got the 4 Howling Mines, if you can Twiddle a Time Vault and get another turn off of it, you know, when you don't have things locked down, man, you just draw a ton of cards. And it can just be so fantastic. But again, you know, he's got the Kismets in there. So that's a good thing to look at. So, yeah, I suppose that's my comments on it here. And yeah, all the Chronotogs everywhere inside of there. It's like a funny way to like look at that picture. I mean, who has that many Chronotogs? I guess Rich Shay does. Very interesting. Okay, so the last deck here. This is Markus Lundqvist. And man, I gotta say, first of all, like, I love that trophy that he's got from a previous old school tournament. Like, that's a deck box, if I remember right. Man, that thing is cool. I see why he puts it in pictures. I would too. That thing is really cool. I don't know who made it, but whoever made it, man, props to you. That thing is seriously cool. And I like how he's got the Chaos Orb sitting right on it. So I think that these cards here, by the way, are his sideboard. So the majority of his deck is, what we've got here is, you got the Guardian Beast, you got the Chaos Orb. So he's obviously trying to go for the whole reuse the Chaos Orb every turn kind of strategy. And he's even got a copy artifact in here. So he definitely wants to do that kind of strategy. Like, you know, get a Guardian Beast in play, activate your Chaos Orb, and keep removing permanents and chew you down every single turn. And that's a very good, effective strategy. And here in the sideboard, you can see that he's got Power Artifact and Basalt Monolith, which effectively is an infinite mana combo. And that powers up his Fireballs and the Rocket Launcher that you can see here. And it's interesting that he put that in the sideboard, so he's not going to do his infinite mana on the initial game. He's going to play a very kind of control-y, lock the board state down a little bit and blow up your permanents kind of game. And then going to the sideboard, he's kind of shifts more over to like a combo deck that can just turn on a dime and just blow you off the table. So it's interesting how you can kind of gear change like that. I think that's very interesting, and that can definitely throw an opponent off. Some of the interesting card selections I saw he made, even though this is very kind of control-y kind of deck, he's got the Mahamoti Jin and 1 Serendib Efreet in there. And of course, they're great creatures, and I'm sure they helped him. Me personally, if I was doing this deck, those Triskelions, I might have leaned deeper into the Triskelion strategy, and also so limited maybe these guys, and maybe traded one of these 2 Icy Manipulators for a Tawnos Coffin, because Tawnos Coffin and Triskelion, man, that combo is amazing. You can keep bringing them back into play and adding counters to them and beefing them up, and then you can just throw the counters at somebody. So you've got your removal there, you've got beefy creatures as you need it, and the Tawnos Coffin also serves for removal. Like if your opponent's playing a lot of creatures, you can just remove them from play with that Tawnos Coffin until you actually have what you need on your side to deal with them. So that was really interesting. I'd probably lean that direction. That Nevin Rawls disc, I'm really questioning that one because he's got an awful lot of good stuff on his side that's going to get blown up. So in my mind, that's not an aggressive disc. That's okay, I'm behind and I need to clear up the board here. That's time to disc. And he's got transmutes. And I love this strategy. The 2 transmutes in the deck and all of these options for artifacts, man, that not only makes a deck really fun to play, but it's amazing the kind of like holes you can dig yourself out of when you've got a transmute artifact and these artifacts in the deck that This one can draw you cards. This one can blow up permanents. This one can give you direct damage. This one can lock down stuff. This one can give you mana, and you can just go get what you need. I mean, it's incredible the kind of stuff you can pull off. So I like that. You know, that is really cool. Control Magic, I like very much. Main deck. So he's kind of got a lot of different directions this deck can actually go. I was a little bit questioning also these Fellwar Stones, because there's 4 Fellwar Stones here, and the bigger thing that I mean, Fellwar Stones are great, but then I also noticed he's only got 3 Moxen here. I don't know, maybe he only owns the 3 Moxen. I think Markus actually has all 5 Moxen. But I'm really curious if those other 2 Moxen would be a better choice than like 2 Fellwar Stones. So maybe like the 5 Moxes and 2 Fellwar Stones could be a better overall choice than 4 Fellwar Stones and 3 Moxen. I don't know. It'd be an interesting question to ask him. And yeah, everything else I like about the deck. Let's see if I have... yeah, I did have a note here. He had Power Sink here, and he only had, as far as I can tell, 1 counterspell, a Drain, and then a Power Sink. I'm really curious on that Power Sink. I personally might have just doubled up this counterspell instead of going with the Sink. He doesn't have an awful lot of mana limiting stuff inside of here. So that unless he has massive mana generation to out-mana his opponent, that Power Sink is a little bit questionable there. I'd personally maybe just double up the counterspell and drop the Power Sink in this kind of build specifically. Also, if he did end up going with multiple Triskelions instead of the Serendib Efreet and the Mahamoti Jin, then maybe doubling up the copy artifact would be a really good call as well. Because then he could double up any of these powerful artifacts he really needed to, or double up, even better, his Chaos Orb, and get multiple Chaos Orbs, like, you know, flipping even more, right? So, I don't know. Interesting questions. The deck can go a lot of different directions, and he obviously did very well with it, because he made top 16 out of 150 people, so major congrats to all that. So, let's see, let me make this full screen here now again. If I go back to this one, and I grab this. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much the comments that I've got on this build, or all these 16 builds. It's a really cool tournament. You know, the old school online play. Again, the link for the tournament is going to be down there, and I'm even going to put a link for the results of the tournament that has like all of the deck lists listed. It's going to be down in the video description. And I believe it was David Firth Bard again that did all this work setting this all up, and Bryan Manolakos was also like doing some narrating for some of it, and also playing in the tournament, and he does the All Tings Considered podcast. And so there's an awful lot of people that I chat with and know in this tournament. I wish I was able to join the start of this one. I just missed it. I just got busy and I missed it, and I'm hurting because of it. So, but anyways, also you guys notice I did not give a lot of information about how these top 16 decks all finished out. I'm doing that intentionally because I want you guys to go look at these links, and I want you to see how they actually went. And I also want to hear your feedback on what you think about my thoughts on all these decks. Do you think I was off base? Do you like what I had to say? Are you in agreement with some of these pieces? I'd love to hear back from the deck owners as well, the guys that actually piloted them. Maybe there's some points that I missed and some other things that would be really good insights. Please list it in the comments. It'd be a great discussion. So congratulations to the top 16 finishers, to everyone that played in this tournament. And for everyone who hasn't yet tried old school, also please notice this. There was budget decks all over the place, and they did very well, right? In fact, notice that out of the top 16, there was only 1 copy of the deck. Most of these ones that made it in to these top 16 were like aggressive creature decks. And like, look how many of them played Serendib Efreet. I mean, talk about all-star creature of blue, right? I mean, he's it, right? He's a fantastic creature, and he's really proving his worth here. So, I don't know, interesting little notes about all that. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. And yeah, come on back and check out the other videos. Bye.